Today I'm taking you for a look around the Rover 75. The 75 is Rover's executive car from the late 90s and early 2000s, being produced between 98 and 2005. Produced at a time when BMW owned the Rover group, and therefore there are quite a few BMW inspired engineering bits within the car that I'll go into a little bit later. But it's gorgeous. It's such a good looking car. And the design's more than 20 years old now. The design was first shown at the Birmingham Motor Show in 1998, so 21 years ago, and it just looks fantastic. Love this car. It's definitely one of the prettiest cars ever to come out of the British motor industry, and probably one of the prettiest executive cars ever to be launched in the UK. I just think it's fantastic. When BMW bought the Rover Group in 1994, BMW's CEO, whose name I'm not going to try and pronounce, I'll put his name on the screen now, declared that he had the faith in the Rover engineers to be able to produce a car completely on their own and not to have any kind of BMW influence on it. And the 75 is a product of that. The 75 was built as a replacement to the 600 and 800 series Rovers, both of which were based on Honda platforms. And development started in 1994 when BMW bought Rover. The 600 series Rover, which was about the same kind of size as the 75, was launched in 1993 and was a co-development with Honda, their equivalent being the Accord. And the 800 series, which was launched in 1986, Rover's equivalent of the Honda Legend. Both of which were fine cars, but by the mid-90s were getting long in the tooth, and BMW didn't want to keep up royalty payments to Honda for their platforms. The three projects that Rover started working on under BMW's ownership were known as Flagship, as a direct Rover 800 replacement, and two other projects known as Eric and Core, both replacements for the Rover 800 Coupe and the Rover 600 respectively, both of which were abandoned in favour of one unified platform for all three cars, and ended up just being one model, because the 600 and 800 weren't actually that different in size, and so there was no point producing two different models to replace both of them. And the 75 is a weird size. It's slightly bigger than a 3 series but slightly smaller than a 5 series. That might be to do with BMW not wanting to compete with themselves. But if there's one thing that sums up the 75, it's elegance. It is such a good looking car and a perfect product of the retro modern styling in the 90s that you see so much in things like the VW New Beetle and the R50 Mini. The R50 Mini and the 75, both designed by Rover. And BMW allowed Rover to keep the 75 because it was no use to them when they split the Rover group up for parts in 2000. At the time, the blame for the retro modern styling on 75 was placed at BMW's feet, especially by James May in his Top Gear review of the 75. He said that he didn't like it because it was too retro in its styling, whereas in reality a lot of people involved with the project say that Rover decided on this style themselves, and so BMW weren't really that involved until much later on in the project. And Rover had free rein for much of their suspension and for the platform used with the car. It's also commonly said that the Rover 75 uses a 5 series platform. It uses a 5 series floor, in fact. But I can't find any information that backs that up, really. As much as this car does have a massive transmission tunnel and is front wheel drive, so it doesn't really need a transmission tunnel, all the things that I've read about the car say that this was purely for structural strength and for rigidity. to make the car as stiff as possible so that it handles well. And this car does handle well. It's no BMW in the way it handles, because it's set up very, very differently to a BMW. It's set up to be like a Rover, it's set up to be comfortable. But it does handle very well considering the size of the car and how forgiving the suspension is. Following on from that point about the floor, the 75 uses a modified BMW Z-axle rear suspension, which is not interchangeable with any, it's not close enough to any BMW Z-axle rear suspension to be attributed to one BMW model. As with this car being front-wheel drive, the suspension had to be modified massively in order to work with the balance of a front-wheel drive car. Same with the floor. Rover wouldn't have used a 5 Series floor in this car because it would have been way too expensive to modify it for front wheel drive use. It was much smarter to create their own floor. At the front, the 75 uses McPherson struts, which is a radical departure from the Honda collaboration cars, which all used double wishbone. At the insistence of Honda, actually, originally the Rover 800 wasn't going to use double wishbones at the front, but Honda insisted that Rover did, as that was the Honda tradition, using double wishbones. One thing that was really important to both BMW and Rover was emphasising the brand values of Rover and what being a Rover meant, as Rover really had lost their traditional values, and the idea of owning a Rover wasn't as important as it had been previously. And so the ad campaign around the 75 had the tagline "Relax, it's a Rover," emphasising comfort and grace and dignity associated with any Rover, especially a Rover that's just designed and built this well, because this is fantastic, this. As I say, the Rover 75 was introduced at the Birmingham Motor Show in 1998 and really impressed the motoring world. And initially people put it up against the Jaguar S-Type, a car that it really wasn't competing with, but was only put up against because they were both launched at the same time in the same place. The launch of the car was also rushed. It shouldn't have taken place until early the next year, which made the newspapers go mental with speculation that there were quality problems when the car was still a number of months away from being on dealer forecourts. And also BMW shot themselves in the foot when they launched Rover, as BMW CEO, the guy who was so optimistic about buying Rover in the first place, decided to say that there were massive problems within Rover while he had an audience at the press conference at the motor show when this car was launched, which meant that the newspaper front pages weren't about the new car and how fantastic it was, but about the troubles within Rover. And indeed, within 7 years, Rover would have gone bust and taken the car with it. I'm convinced that this car really is a mini Rolls-Royce or a mini Bentley, because Autocar said it was the most refined car in its class and its ride quality was excellent. I think the whole car is fantastic. It drives brilliantly, it feels brilliant, and the engine, this one has a 2.5 litre V6. It sounds fantastic, so good. I really don't see why anybody would choose to spend £5,000 on a 2 litre 4-cylinder BMW 3 Series when they could spend £1,000 and get a V6 Rover that's this good, with fantastic leather seats inside it that I'll show you in a minute. There are a number of Rover 75 owners groups on Facebook, and they're all very supportive with really large memberships, and a couple of websites with fantastic amounts of knowledge on them about the way the cars were produced and the changes made throughout the lifespan of this car. This is a 2002, built in December 2002, and this is what's known as a Project Drive car. So the production qualities are not quite as good as they were on the early cars. They cheapened it out a little bit with, you know, no grab handle on the driver's side, only one cup holder in the front, and just a couple of things like that just to make it slightly cheaper to produce, which, when you're looking at a car this luxurious, is maybe a little bit disappointing, but in the grand scheme of things it doesn't really matter. This is a Longbridge built car. Initially they set up the 75 production lines at Cowley in Oxford, but when BMW sold Rover in March 2000, they took the production lines at Cowley and moved them to Longbridge, and vice versa. They took the production lines for the modern Mini that were starting to be built at Longbridge and moved them down to Cowley. So this car should have been built at Cowley, the plant which now makes Minis, but instead was built at Longbridge, Rover's plant in Birmingham, the traditional home of Austin. This is the first big Rover to ever be produced at Longbridge. The 800 was produced at Cowley, and I think the SD1 was built at Solihull, and all the ones before then were built at traditional Rover plants rather than British Leyland plants such as Longbridge. Right, I'm now going to take you for a quick walk around the 75, and first I'll show you under the bonnet and talk about the engines. If I can find the bonnet thing. This is Rover's own 2.5 litre 24 valve quad cam V6. As much as this engine bay isn't perfect, it's a good indication of what any 75 would look like under here. This is no Honda V6 or BMW V6, this is all Rover's own work. The engine was initially launched in 1996 in the Rover 800, but was quite unreliable in the 800, and the owners kind of did the R&D work for Rover so that they can make a properly reliable V6 when it was modified for use in the 75. But it's a fantastic engine. Even though it is very complex, it has Viz motors in the inlets, which mean that the throttle intakes lengthen and shorten in their length just to increase torque at certain points in the rev range. And being overhead cam, unlike a lot of American V-shaped engines, there are lots of belts going on, which means it's incredibly expensive to replace the cam belts. And that's probably the reason why a lot of these are scrapped, which is a massive shame because they're fantastic cars, but people can't afford to change the belts. People don't want to change the belts, they don't think the car's worth doing. And then the belts fail, and then they decide that the car's really unreliable because the belts have failed when they've just not kept up on the maintenance. You can't really see much in here because of this massive black plastic cover on top of the engine, but you can see the top of the struts, you can see the battery holder, you see the intake, but not much else really. This has a 5-speed Jatco automatic transmission, which is a good gearbox. It is a good gearbox, it's very smooth. It can sometimes be a little bit jerky when pulling away, but that might be just this individual car rather than a fault of all 5-speed Jatco transmissions. There are a couple of known issues with these engines. As I said, the belts are incredibly expensive to change, but also they put plastic thermostat housing and plastic intakes on these cars for both emissions and for cost cutting, and the thermostat housings are known to break on these and just seep a little bit of coolant out into the V of the engine. The thermostat's down in here somewhere within the V, so they're known to leak. The Viz motors are also known to break, which means that you might be low on torque at certain times of the rev range. But this is a KV6 engine, KV6 line of engines, should I say. They're not really related to the 4-cylinder K-series engines in other Rover cars, like my Metro that I reviewed the other day. And so they're not known for head gasket failures. None of the problems with the cooling systems of the 4-cylinder K-series engine are the same on the V6, because they're really very different engines, apart from that thermostat leaking problem. But it sounds immense, this engine, so growly. In fact, let's go and start it up now. While I'm here, I might as well show you the key. It's a quite nondescript really, just early 2000s car key. This button here for the unlock, which is in the shape of a Rover crest, as you can see, that's part of the Project Drive cost cutting. And they took out the pattern of the Rover badge there. Let's start the car. Just so you can hear the sound. Listen to this. It does sound immense. Such a good noise. And it's so smooth, this engine as well. It really is. So smooth. It does sound fantastic, and we'll probably go out for a drive in a bit and show you what the car sounds like out on the road. But I can't drive this car, which is a shame, just because me being 19 years old, therefore completely unable to insure a car with a 2.5 litre V6 engine. I thought I should probably go through the specs of this engine as well, considering I forgot before. So this 2.5 litre KV6 makes 177 brake horsepower, 180 foot-pounds of torque, meaning you can go from 0 to 62 in 8.9 seconds, which is not slow at all really. It does make the car feel really quite quick, especially compared to most of the competition at the time. I mean, this is no big growling V8, this is no BMW M car muncher by any means. This is a big luxury car. You know, no sport suspension here or anything like that, but 8.9 seconds is a really good time to go to 60 in a car of this size and of this age. And fuel economy, it's disappointing depending on how you look at it. 27 mpg is the average, which is realistic with this car as long as you're not doing city driving all the time like this car is at the moment, and so it's not quite doing 27. But when you're thinking you've got a 2.5 litre V6 under the bonnet and you've got really quite a large car, that's not too bad at all. Really not bad, especially compared to some 4-cylinder petrol BMWs, which are not that much more economical, of the same kind of age. And yet with this car you get a lovely V6 growl. Right, I think we'll look around the interior of the 75 now, and it's just gorgeous. All the materials used are of such high quality and they look so good. It's definitely a luxury car. Does not feel like you're compromising in any way with one of these. I mean, this is a little bit of a, you know, 75 owners will notice the problem here. This is a Longbridge car, and it has these fantastic embossed Rover crests in the leather of the headrests. These were only on Cowley cars, and so this car has had new seats put in it in the past, which also means that the heated seats now don't work. I suppose that's purely because the seats have been swapped, because neither of them work, but never know, it might have just broken over the last 17 years. If we sit inside and close the door, it's so quiet. Sound deadening is brilliant in this car. It is really, really quiet and feels like you are in a proper luxury car. And these oval dials are so quintessentially Rover. I think they look fantastic as well. And the way they light up, I don't know whether you'll be able to see this on the camera, but they light up with backlights there. I'll probably do another video at night time of this, but I don't know, maybe not. But they're fantastic. And the steering wheel with a Rover crest in it. On the door you've got this fantastic, I don't know how to describe this material, but it's so soft. I don't want to describe it as felt, because it isn't, but this cloth used here is just so nice. Chrome door handle surrounds, your controls for your 4 electric windows, your electric mirrors, and your lockout on the rear windows. Got your light controls down here, so your side lights and your headlights, your front fogs and your rear fogs, your dimming and your headlamp adjustment. We've got a little, almost a T-shelf there, you really can't fit anything on it, mind you. And you've got your 4 vents, which all throw in fresh air as well, which is something that's fantastic. I showed you this on my Metro as well. But with this dial here, you can control cold, fresh air coming into the car, so the car never really feels stuffy inside. Especially if you just put the fan on one. You've got an analog clock in the centre here, which looks fantastic. I'll show you the controls here. You've got your indicators and your flash, and then I believe you pull for your main beam, and then over here you've got your wipers. You've got your automatic transmission lever here, and the door locks are in the centre here, and your hazard switch is in maybe a little bit of a weird place, but that's just where they put it. You've got a sports mode, a snow mode, and your standard economy mode in the transmission. I don't know what's really very economical about this car, but there you go. You've got stereo radio cassette, which does work. You've got automatic climate control and air conditioning that does work. Air conditioning that's ice cold is fantastic. And you've got your heated seats. I've just moved the lever out of the way. You can see you have a cup holder on the passenger side, and as I said before, no cup holder here because this is a Project Drive car, but in the centre you've got your fag lighter. Down here you've got an ashtray and this little cubby down here to store things. On the passenger side you've got a shelf here to store documents, books, ties, whatever, which is one of the most useful features of any car. And then in the glove box, it's just a glove box. You do have a light, but not much more to say about that really. You do have door pockets in each of the doors, which do have a nice bit of depth to them, but they're not enormous, and there aren't many features attached to them, but what do you expect from a 19-year-old car? All the materials in the interior are of a really nice quality. I mean, up on the dashboard here is all soft. Even around here is all really nice materials. There's no hard plastics anywhere. The only place where there are a couple of hard plastics is in the back here. But the quality of this interior really is amazing. Even the headlining is just so soft. No sagging at all. And of course these dome lights in the middle, which these aren't the original bulbs, these are LEDs that someone's put in, which is completely tasteless, but oh well. The sun visors are really nicely trimmed as well, really soft. And you get two lights on either side. Hello. Now I'm sat in the back of the 75. It's amazing. It's one of the most luxurious back seats of a 20-year-old design I've ever seen. I mean, I've got loads of legroom for the seat set a little bit further back than I would sit really. But I've got this centre armrest here, and inside I've got a hub nut sticker and place for a pen, memo pad, cup rests, all that kind of stuff. But the seats are just so comfortable. You really relax into them. This is the place to be in the 75. You really want to be in the back because it's just so nice. You can really see why the government used these cars as their ministerial limousines back in the early 2000s, because they are just so nice to be in. You feel so cosseted by this fantastic leather. It's just so nice, and the contours of the seats are perfect, and you really sink into them as well. And the doors are so well trimmed, and it's so quiet in here that I don't think there are many cars that you feel as cosseted in for the price. I mean, this car's £1,000, and it's crazy how much car you can buy for so little money when you don't decide that you want to go and spend loads of money on a lease deal. So if you look at some of the other features in the back, you've got two vents here. You can't control, you don't have climate control, so there's no 3-zone climate control, there's only 2-zone. But you have airflow, and you have an ashtray, but sadly no fag lighter back here. You also have these pop-out cup holders in the middle, which I'm struggling to open and close, so I'm going to leave them open, because that seems to be one of the few parts of the car that the quality is suffering on. As I say, in the middle you've got cup rests, really not cup holders at all. You've got a place for a pen and a place for your hub nut sticker. But it's so important having an armrest in the back of executive car like this, because it really does make the rear passengers feel so much more comfortable in here. You also have in this particular 75 a rear blind which just come up and slots into these holes up here, but I'm not going to bother putting them up because it's a pain in the backside, to be honest with you. But if we get back out the car, and the doors just sound such good quality as well, they just thunk perfectly. I'll do that again for you, because why not? But they just click open and then thunk closed. So fantastic. So now I'll show you in the boot. You can't open the boot with just a button from the back. You've got to either use the key or use the interior release. But it's completely palatial. It's enormous in here. You fit so many bodies in here, you wouldn't believe. But the rear seats don't fold down. That was an option, not ticked on this car, which is disappointing really. I think all rear seats of cars like this should fold down. But if we lift up the boot floor, you've got full-size spare wheel. Great, something you don't get on modern cars. You've got your toolkit, little tiny bits of surface rust, etc., but nothing bad. These cars are known to leak actually around the rear lights, and so all that there is all due to this car leaking at some point in its past. Right, I thought I'd take you out for a little drive in it, even though I can't drive it and the owner doesn't want to be in the video, but just to hear the engine noise and to just feel how quiet and smooth it is. I mean, I've got the window open now, but it's such a nice place to be in here. That's really quite quick, but so smooth, and with such a great soundtrack, such a good sounding engine. The owner of this car hasn't had it very long at all, only a couple of months, and he went to this from a E90 BMW 318i SE, and that cost 6 times the price he's paid for this car. I mean, that car didn't have very many miles on it when he got it, and he put a lot of miles on it, but that car was hideously unreliable, and he'd come to this Rover, having kind of been persuaded into it by me really, but he absolutely loves it. And that's not just me saying it because I pushed him into it, but he loves the V6 engine. And he goes out for drives in the car now, and you never saw him going out for drives in the E90 BMW, but now somehow he's found a car in which he really wants to go out and drive because it's just so nice. And you feel so good sitting in one of these cars. It's such a nice place to be. But I'll do an outro here as the wind's starting to pick up a little bit. But thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and most importantly comment and share so you can get some more people watching these videos. And you can tell me what you'd like me to do next. Would you like me to go more in depth on the engineering of these cars, history of these cars, or whatever? Just comment below and like, etc. All that stuff already said. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you again.